Hey guys, as always, thanks for tuning in. Jay Helmsing here. Today I'm going to give you the 2-week update with Project One Gun. That's my Glock 19 Gen 5 that I've transitioned to carrying, using, shooting exclusively. And we'll give you guys some updates on that, the progress with it, what I'm noticing so far, and you know, some pros, some cons, all that kind of good stuff. And I'll also kind of rehash the things that I am doing this experiment for. So if you're not familiar with this, if this is the first time you've tuned in to catch one of these, this is going to be the first official update based just on time and not malfunction or anything alone. So I got a lot of stuff to share with you guys. So let's talk about the reasons why I started this project. So I've got them written down. I actually added one reason that was kind of in there all along. I just didn't know how to word it correctly to put it out there. So the reasons that I'm doing this, first off, is can one gun do it all? In other words, can one gun serve all purposes that anyone really needs to serve with a weapon? And I picked obviously the Glock 19 for this because it's a concealable size, so I can carry it. It's also got a 4-inch barrel. It's long enough to do some actual defensive work. It's long enough to do a little bit of target use and things like that. So it's a pretty good do-all gun, and it's kind of the, you know, the rule of the road as far as do-all guns go would be the Glock 19. So we'll just kind of experiment with this first and see if it can be accomplished with this. Then we know we got a good benchmark going on. So, you know, and that's not just from, you know, obviously one gun can serve anybody if they don't shoot a lot, but this is for like more of a volume shooter. So if someone is more serious about shooting, is it going to be a gun that can serve all those purposes and not leave them wanting or desiring something else and really feel like they're leaving some component out of their either their training or their competition or something like that? Is it going to serve in that purpose in stock form? So, you know, that's obviously number one. Number two is, does shooting one gun polarize you? In other words, the things that I'm learning on this platform, are they going to transfer on up to other gun platforms? And for those of you that aren't familiar with me and my background, I also shoot the Beretta 92 series or the M9 in the military, and I also shoot the SIG 320 platform in my department usage. So those are two guns that I'm issued that are completely different from this platform here. So I'm kind of looking at, you know, the things that I learn. Am I going to start degrading in other areas because I'm spending a whole lot of time on a very unique platform that I don't really have to shoot other places other than, you know, just my own preference here. The third one we're going to look at, and this is kind of something that I've been very interested in, is more of like a you know, a holistic approach, or kind of, you know, simplifying your life, if you will. In simplifying my approach to range sessions, is there something to be gained from that? I think you guys are going to be kind of interested with my my preliminary findings on that. But you know, I had a bad habit, and some of you are probably in the same boat. I've got, you know, quite a variety of guns that I like. So when I would go to the range, it's about a 20-minute drive for me, and I would just pack all kinds of different guns with me. I'd be taking like 5 different platforms. So I really wouldn't get a whole lot of specific training in, because I would be like, oh, I'm not shooting too well on the Glock today, I'm going to transition to my Beretta or something like that. I always had that extra variable added. So you know, aside from, you know, the training polarization and stuff like that, obviously the extra, you know, packing extra things, moving from a gigantic duffel size range bag to more of a small, you know, just carrying my ear pro and eye pro and things like that, the ammunition to the range. Is there something to be said for more of a minimalist approach to range sessions? And the last thing, this is one I didn't cover last time, but I didn't really know how to put it into wording. I really want to find out if taking that equation out, taking the platform equation out, and really allowing me that time at the range, those 2 hours or 3 hours, to focus specifically on mechanics and not just switch out guns and get used to different platforms and then go to a different platform and things like that, but to really spend that time focusing on different mechanics. Is that going to increase or improve my shooting ability in a more rapid fashion? So in other words, by taking all those guns out of the equation and just sticking with one and working just mechanics and fundamentals, is that going to pay off? Am I going to improve more at a more rapid feeling pace than I was with my my old approach, which was just shotgun 5 or 6 guns at one time, have a good old time, and get what I can get out of the range session? So we're going to look at all 4 of those things. I'll go into those in depth in just a moment. First off, initial impressions. You guys might notice from the title here, we've got some regrets so far, and it has nothing to do with the Glock itself. It has nothing to do with reliability, dependability, my faith in the platform, or anything like that. So I'm at a point in time where the novelty is kind of worn off this project, and I'm getting into the nitty-gritty of it. So the first things I'm going to cover are some drawbacks I'm noticing. We'll start with the downside first, okay? So the drawbacks I'm noticing, I want to shoot different guns than this. I'm at the point now where I wouldn't say I'm sick of shooting this gun, but it's just kind of boring. And you know, a lot of us would say the plain old stock Glock is about the Toyota Corolla of the gun world. There's just not a whole lot to be super excited about. I do find myself wanting to dry fire some of my other guns, and I do appreciate some features of my other guns that I don't get to enjoy anymore. So it's not like I've been locked in a prison and I couldn't handle a gun or anything like that, but obviously, you know, me just trying to be strict and stay only with this platform for all my dry firing, all my range sessions, everything like that. I've really come to appreciate my my SIG 320s, believe it or not. Not necessarily the hammer guns. I haven't started getting hammer withdrawal just yet. But my SIG 320, you know, I pulled this out and I was just like, man, I just want to shoot this gun. I want something different right now in my range lineup. And so that's, you know, kind of the first drawback. And something that I've really noticed in working with the Glock trigger, is how darn nice this 320 trigger is. I mean, there's just not a whole lot to complain about. And this gun here had one of the I wouldn't say bad, but one of the more low-end trigger feels that I had in a 320. It's starting to break itself out of that, but you know, just how nice it is not to have that big hitchy trigger, and to really have, you know, more of a solid feeling on the trigger. It's kind of an odd, you know, it's a difficult thing to describe, but it's got a lot less hitchiness in it. There's a lot less hiccups. There's a lot less, you know, it's more of a smooth draw. There's that solid wall that it meets on every time, and a lot of people say it's a crisp break. I don't know if that's exactly the right way to describe it. It's not necessarily crisp. It's not like you're sitting on a wall. You know, it does pull through that wall, but you know, darn good trigger on these 320s. And you know, for a while, especially my first few range outings, I was kind of, I wouldn't say I was doing terrible with the Glock, but there was a learning curve. There really was, and getting used to the nuances of that trigger versus this. You can kind of, at least I can be a little bit more sloppy with this 320 than I can with the Glock platform. So just some things I've noticed so far. A little bit of remorse, kind of want to get back to my 320. Not saying it's a better gun, just a different feeling. And that's kind of the level up that I'm at now, where I'm just kind of, you know, bombarding one thing over and over again. I just kind of want that little bit of variety, but I digress. You know, we'll see if that goes away with future installments of this. The other thing I'm going to talk about is, and it's going to kind of come back up later when I talk about the four facets up there of this project. This is kind of dangerous, you know, it really is. I mean, if you're sticking with one gun, man, there's a lot of variables that you have to think about. And, you know, I was like, man, I could probably count out of the tens of thousands of rounds I've shot through a Glock, I can probably on one hand count the number of times that it actually malfunctioned. Out of all those different Glocks that I've shot, I really had it malfunction. So I'm not really worried about overall malfunctioning. But there is something to be said. You know, I transition a lot from dry fire in the house. I might go out and do just an errand real quick. So I'm transitioning from that dry fire state back to a loaded state, going back out, you know, doing an errand or something, coming back, maybe doing some more dry fire. So transitioning out from a hot status back into a cold status, you know, making sure I'm safe on that end. And then, you know, maybe going to the range. So I'm transitioning from dry fire status to another hot status, so I can go to the range and be armed while going to the range. I go to the range, I transition to more of a range setting where I'm carrying outside the waistband, so I go to that. And then obviously, you know, going back from the range, I'm back in a defensive posture. So it's a little bit hairy, you know, sometimes when you're putting down 200, 300 rounds, beating a gun pretty hard, you know, getting everything nice and hot and just kind of working to those, I wouldn't say to the envelopes of the gun design, but, you know, really working the gun hard and then strapping that thing back on your hip and going home. I mean, I think there's something to be said for having a range dedicated gun or having a dry fire dedicated gun. This may be the same platform, and I really kind of looking at retrospect in this, I think the best method to do would be to have maybe Project 2 gun or Project 3 gun, where you pick a platform, you know, let's say Gen 5 Glock 19, and I just buy 2 or 3 of these just like this, and I use them for different purposes. That way I'm still getting kind of the same transfer, I'm still getting the same usage and the same commonality. However, I'm also not taking as much risk. I'm not running into situations where I'm constantly loading and unloading and loading and unloading, or going hot and going back cold, or going to the range beating the snot out of it and then carrying it home and hoping that I don't run into a carjacker along the way. So that's kind of another regret that I've had so far. If I had to do it over, I would probably have one gun as my main defensive gun. I would keep that in pretty tip-top shape. I would obviously practice with it once in a while, but I'd keep it nice and lubed, nice and clean, and then I'd have maybe a range gun and a practice gun or something like that. So just something to look at, as we're kind of getting into this, something that's kind of reared its head, and we'll kind of get a little bit deeper into the woods on that in just a moment. So with that out of the way, some things I have noticed. And the positive end are that I'm definitely progressing very quickly on the platform, as you might expect if I'm shooting just this one gun. I have really posted some stellar numbers on Manus X with just the stock Gen 5 Glock. My trigger pull has improved, my speed has improved, my target acquisition has improved, and I mean it's improved markedly. And there are a couple reasons for that I'll talk about in just a moment. But so I am feeling a lot more confident with the gun, and I have learned those nuances in a very quick order because I'm just using it so much. It's just, I'm getting so familiar with this gun and just using it over and over again that that's really working out pretty well. It also is kind of nice just to have a few holsters, 2 or 3 holsters. I probably got, just like everyone else, 2 or 3 dozen holsters, but some go-tos that I can stick with. I use this here, Raven Concealment Vanguard, if I don't want to run the light on it and I want something nice and light and just easy to tuck really quickly. And I've got my CNG that I use if I have a light on it. So those are pretty much my 2 in the waistband holsters. I go to that. I've got my outside the waistband for competition. I can just bring that with me. My range pack has definitely shrunk down to more of a manageable size. It's actually this little day pack thing that I'll show you here from Maxpedition. So this is basically all I take to the range now. I've got my holsters, my shot timer, my stapler. I've got my medical kit in there with the tourniquets and whatnot. I've got some spray paint. I've got 5 or 6, I believe I have 6 extra range mags in here just for the 19. And then of course ammunition and whatnot, and some other little doodads and emergency parts. But it is nice just to kind of have that go bag and not have to worry about grabbing 4 or 5 mags off my wall over here for every gun and stuff like that. So I'm kind of, it's kind of a give and take, I guess, on that end as far as, having the convenience of doing that, but also kind of running that risk of having a defensive gun and then beating the snot out of it and looking at going to some pretty high round count classes with it, and then still relying on that when you go to dinner at night, taking that gun with you to dinner. Again, no malfunctions, no real issue. It just kind of gives me a little bit of a don't really want to be in that situation sort of thing. So we'll kind of see how that evolves as well as this project continues. So let's get up to the big 4 here. Can one gun do it all? Now in my findings, I have 0 complaints, as I kind of expected. I have no complaints as far as concealability. It conceals easier than my 320. It just does. It's less of a large firearm. It's a little bit less of a grip there to tuck. It just seems, because it's flat on the sides, it just seems to maybe tuck in a little bit easier. So no big issues there. It conceals well. As far as range time, I have not been left like, man, I wish I had my Glock 17 or my Glock 34. So I would say it's been perfectly fine as a range gun. I've not had any real issues there with competition or anything either. So yeah, I would say, can one gun do it all? Yeah, no issues at all. And I don't think it's a Glock thing. I really don't. I think you could pick probably any compact size, probably a Glock 17 size, full-size duty weapon that worked well for you, and you could apply it to any of these things. Of course, there are going to be concessions here, there, and wherever, but I think this could be done with any gun and any platform, and I'm just kind of reinforcing that as I go along, that sure, one gun can do it all. It just is a matter of your dedication to that platform. Number 2, does shooting one gun polarize you? Well, I can say without a doubt no so far. And I'll give you the round counts that I'm looking at so far. And this is a low round count, so this is not my typical shooting. I've had some obligations and things to do. Up to this date, I have 600 live fire rounds in the last 2 weeks. So 600 live fire rounds have gone through this. Every week I've been putting in 2,000 dry fire pulls. So 2,000 dry fire pulls. I use the Mantis X to kind of monitor that and tabulate that for me, and you know, record my data as far as trigger pull goes. I will have a review on that product, but I'm not going to go into that here. But just know that I'm doing a ton of dry fire, and quite a bit of range usage just for recreational stuff. And I also did qualification 2 days ago with the Beretta M9 for the Army. And I was the highest qualifier there. So I shot, you know, above and beyond pretty much everybody else that was out there. And I won't say that's completely uncommon. I'm not going to toot my own horn or anything like that. I do put in more rounds than probably anybody else that was there qualifying, but I did not have any hitches at all during that range session. I didn't have any issues with reloads. I didn't have any issues with drawing out of the holster. I didn't have any issues with target acquisition. I didn't have any issues with single to double transitions on the hammer gun. So I would say no, that at this time I have not noticed any polarization, that it's just I'm learning things that only apply to the Glock platform. So that's obviously a pretty awesome thing, and I feel like I was a little more savvy this time with the M9 because I have been handling this gun so much, just putting so much time in and repetition on the handgun itself. But it did definitely transfer, I feel like, to my last outing with the Beretta M9, which is a totally different platform. So we'll see how that progresses in the future as well. To simplify my life, we kind of already got into this. My range bag is smaller. I'm carrying the same amount of rounds to the range. But again, I don't know that it's simplifying my life, really. I mean, there are some aspects in which it is, but there are some aspects in which I'm kind of like, I'm not really ready to buy that yet. So obviously, I have less equipment to go to the range. I have less variables involved. However, there is that kind of, you know, breath-holding moment where I am carrying my gun defensively to the range, back from the range, and things like that, which I know a lot of people do every day. I'm just not super comfortable with the amount of dry firing and the amount of range time I get in, you know, relying on that gun. And it has taken me longer because at the end of my range sessions, instead of throwing my stuff in the bag and cleaning it at home, I now have to break it down. I swab out the barrel, I wipe it down real quick, I make sure there's, you know, the soot and everything is out of all the action. That way, if I do have to use it, it's not going to run into that 1 in 1,000 or 1 in a million chance of, you know, jamming or something just because it was just shot at the range with some probably pretty dirty range ammo. So, you know, I am spending more time cleaning the gun and maintaining the gun than I would if I just had a dedicated range gun and a dedicated carry gun. So, you know, take that for what it's worth. I think that there's something to it, but I don't think I'm on the right track for overall simplification in that aspect there. We'll talk also, while I'm on this, about some modifications that I'm looking at making to the gun. Now, I have these sights on here, and again, this is not an update or not a review on these sights. These are Ameriglo Hackathorn Sights, which if you guys watch my original, these sights replaced my original plastic sights because of the failure the second time I had this gun out at the range. I just don't trust anything but metal sights, especially for defensive use. With that said, these Hackathorn sights are kind of leaving me wanting, and I'll tell you what I'm going to do and why I'm going to do it. So on my SIGs, this is what I carry on my duty guns, same sights. However, there's one cool feature that I don't notice on the Glock ones, and that is this right here, this little set screw on the rear sight. There's also quite a bit higher sight picture on this SIG. As you guys can see, those sights just kind of pop right up there. I've got a little more air on either side, and I'll kind of show you what it looks like from the Glock side of the house. They're very low profile sights, so they sit really low, almost uncomfortably low for me. They're a little bit tighter than the ones on the SIG there that you just saw, and also you're going to notice missing is that set screw there. So what I've noticed is that it takes me a little bit longer to acquire this sight because that front sight is so blasted bright and it's so large that it's hard for me to find that top edge of the sight. The sight sits so low that it's difficult for me to get that perfectly lined up. Now, it's not like I'm losing huge amounts of time, however, it does leave me wanting during my range sessions. This is a great defensive setup, no doubt about it. This for defensive distances, awesome, epic setup. But for more range competition where I'm shooting 25 meters or 25 yards or whatever you want to say and above, I've got to take a little more time to really kind of work with these sights because of the way they're designed. I've also noticed with this super slick NLDC coating, or maybe it's NDLC, whichever one it is, this Glock diamond-like coating that they put on these Gen 5s, which I tend to loathe, although I'm getting used to it because of the slickness, the almost Teflon type texture it's got there. If I were to take this and just lightly tap it, you would see that I could move this rear sight. Now it's in there, it's not going to move just by hand, but any sort of actual, concussion to this rear sight is going to move it in the dovetail. It seems like the dovetails on these, maybe because of the way this coating lays up more thin, there's just a little more room in there. They fit a little bit more loosely, and also they're so slick on this coating, and you can see I'm getting basically zero wear. Doing a lot of repetitions in and out of a holster. So it's a very, very tough, resilient coating. However, it's very slick, and it's easy to knock this sight out of alignment. I've had to adjust it to zero almost every time I went to the range. So that's kind of leaving me wanting as well. So I'm going to replace these with some fiber optics. Reason being, even though it's a defensive gun, I don't mind fiber optics because I always use a light when there's a possibility of having it out at night. Now I typically use a light at all times, and I have also a handheld light that I carry with me at all times as well. So I trust those standalone lights more than I do just the tritium, front and rear to line those up, because you obviously have to identify your target. So again, I'm going with some Heine's. The fiber optic ledge sights, so those should be in here before long, so I will be switching those out, and that's just more to kind of lean toward the range sessions and also have the defensive stuff in mind, but kind of give me a little more flexibility at the range. So those will be going on there in just a few days, hopefully. So lastly, focus on mechanics. So I have been able to spend my range sessions a lot more I would say intently focusing on specific drills. And that has paid off huge dividends for me. And I feel like this year of development is really what I needed, because I was hanging up on the level of, I'm a decent, good shooter. However, I shot so many different platforms, and I would switch up platforms so often that I was not getting really proficient. And I feel like now I'm really putting in the reps, really putting in the time, and I don't have those breaks at the range where I'm like, I just shot the El Prez with my Glock, I'm going to try it next with my SIG. Those sort of wasted ammunition times and the wasted time is not there, and it's really letting me focus on specific things, whether it's sight picture, sight alignment. Trigger pull's been a big one. I've really developed a lot in the last few weeks on trigger pull. So that is definitely a benefit of going to one platform and just working on mechanics. I mean, it just really frees you up to get that one variable out of the way and just work on developing you as a shooter. So big thumbs up there. I'd say that's probably the biggest takeaway for me so far, is if you really want to get good as a shooter, take all those variables out. Find one gun you can work with, find one gun you can live with, and take that gun to the range and develop yourself. And that's really been a big finding for me, and that's something that I can stand by with confidence and say that it's definitely started to make a difference just in the 2 weeks I've been doing it. So take that for what it's worth. I might have a different opinion here in the next few weeks, but again, I plan on doing these every couple weeks, so I will check in again with the big four we just talked about, any findings, any failures, anything that's evolving. I'll see if I break away from this wanting to shoot other guns and I just kind of learn to love this Glock lifestyle that I've kind of forced myself into now. But other than that, I really don't have anything else to report that's critical right now, so I will continue to lay down some massive dry fire numbers, and obviously hopefully in the neighborhood of 200 to 400 rounds every 5 days is what I'm shooting at as far as live fire. So I'll update you guys here shortly. Thanks for tuning in. Be sure to check out my Instagram, Jay Helmsing on Instagram. I'm posting live first person footage of shooting this gun, also some third person footage of me shooting this gun, some pictures, some updates, things like that will be on there as well. I appreciate you guys tuning in, and again, find as much information and much resources as you can, learn from all of that stuff, and continue to work on your craft and hone your craft to make yourself better. I appreciate it, guys. Jay Helmsing.